Let's talk about cognitive shortcuts. So I've been thinking about this a lot actually recently, and I've decided to make a couple of quick videos about a couple of cognitive shortcuts that I'm pretty familiar with. Now, a cognitive shortcut, as I'm defining it, is basically just something that we do as humans, either consciously or unconsciously, that just simplifies life a little bit. They can simplify what we have to process, they can simplify how we think about things. In and of themselves, I don't see cognitive shortcuts as being good or bad unless we're not aware of them. If we're not aware of them at all, I think they can lead to bad outcomes or at least bad circumstances. But if we just know about them a little bit, we can mitigate some of the trade-off. And when I say trade-off, I'm referring to one of my favorite Thomas Sowell quotes: "There are no solutions; there are only trade-offs." I think a lot of times when we're looking at things in life, if we're thinking about them as only good or only bad, and we don't take the time to figure out what the trade offs are, we can end up with problems. So, the cognitive shortcut that I'm going to talk about today is something called a filter. And filters are basically just things we put in place to filter the information we're exposed to so we can process the things we care about and not pay attention to things that don't matter to us or things that we don't think matter to us. Traditionally, when I talk about this, it has been in the context of self defense, where I'm trying to help people pay more attention to things they wouldn't normally pay attention to so they can be safer. So, all I'm going to do today is introduce the idea of a filter. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and I'm going to try to give some sense of how you can apply this to daily life. For context, I'm pretty sure the first place I came across this idea was in The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. Now, filters generally come from our interests, our backgrounds, our preferences, and just our experiences in general. Sometimes we filter things out or we focus on things because we've already made a decision about them. And sometimes we do it just because we're not aware of something and we don't know that we're supposed to pay attention to it. One of the easiest examples I've ever used to explain how this can work is if you take two people and send them to a downtown environment that they're not familiar with, so like a new city, and you have them walk down the street during lunch hour when it's busy and there's a lot of hustle and bustle, most likely two different people, they're going to experience different things. They're going to see different things walking down the street at the same time. Let's say you go down a busy street with somebody that you're close with and you know you'll have different interests. It won't be a surprise to either of you that you notice different things. I'm going to use myself for a couple examples just to get an idea of how filters work. So, several years ago, a long time ago, over 20 years ago, I went to a zoo. And when I went to the zoo at that time, I was teaching self defense. I was doing a little bit of bodyguard work. I was thinking pretty much constantly about what's called the predator prey relationship. Yeah, it's just that is the lens through which I viewed the world. That is the filter I applied to a lot of different things. That was the filter I used to solve a lot of problems and figure a lot of things out and communicate with people. So when I went to the zoo, I was looking at almost everything through a predator prey relationship. I wasn't really thinking about any of the animals in a different way. I was really just kind of, predator prey. And just a very simple cue there for people that don't know. If you're looking at an animal and you're trying to figure out if it's a prey animal or a predator animal, in general, we're talking about mammals here. This is a little different if we get into ocean life and somewhat with birds of prey. But in general, predator animals have their eyes in the front of their head so they can chase whatever their prey is. Prey animals tend to have their eyes more on the side of their head so they can glance over their shoulders while they're running away from things. There's other things, obviously, and that doesn't mean that prey animals are defenseless by any means. It's just one way to kind of discern that if you're looking at something and you're not sure what it is. So, kind of leading into my strength and conditioning career, I was reading a lot of Tudor Bampa, I was reading Zatorsky, Charles Poliquin, Pavel Zazelin, and several others that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was reading a lot of books, a lot of textbooks about strength and conditioning and performance. So on that trip to the zoo, I was really looking at things from more of a performance kind of perspective. I was seeing the athleticism of the animals in a way that I did not see when I was only thinking about them from a predator prey standpoint. And it was a really interesting change. Now, something I want to emphasize here is I did not replace my first filter with that second filter. I added the filter. I gained a new filter. So when we learn about things, when we gain new experiences, we you should think of it more of in the sense of You should think of it more in the sense of adding than replacing. Now, other than walking downtown and going to the zoo, what do you do with this? Part of how this applies is just an understanding that everybody filters things, and don't expect people to notice the things you notice in whatever environment. Sometimes you have to teach people about things so they see things and they notice them. And when we're communicating with people, if we understand this a bit, it can make communication a bit easier, and it can help us get ahead of things a bit, because if we're having to explain something to someone and we know their views are different than ours or their life experience is different than ours, sometimes we might have to get a little bit of information about them and figure out how they look at things before we try to communicate with them. So, wrapping this up a bit, just understand that everybody filters things. We have to, because there's just too much information to process. Sometimes when I'm out and about with like friends and family and whatnot, especially if I'm with younger people, I will ask them questions about what they see wherever we are, and I'll just ask questions. I don't tell them what to see. I don't tell them what I see. I will ask them questions about what they notice. This helps to kind of broaden things a little bit so they start to maybe notice things that they should. It's amazing what people will filter out. Recently, I had to go to Home Depot with a friend of mine and his small child, and while we were there was an argument between another customer and an employee, and I am generally very protective. It's just my state, but when I'm with anyone I feel protective for, that it's just heightened. So I dialed into that pretty fast. It is important to note when I say I dial into something and I'm paying attention to it, most likely no one will notice that I'm doing that. I'm subtle about it. It's not an overt thing. I'm not getting close. I'm not getting involved. I'm just aware of whatever's happening. But my friend, who we were with his kid, I think he was really stressed about work and things, and he didn't really seem to notice it at all. Like, he didn't realize two adult males were having a confrontation that was not calm, and it, could have potentially been dangerous. He has different filters than I do. That's not a judgment, it's just a statement. Doesn't mean he's not a good dad or a good business person. He just was thinking about whatever he was thinking about and didn't cue into that. Now, that took care of itself. It wasn't a problem. We didn't have to worry about it. But because I noticed it and I was paying attention to it, if it had escalated, I would have been in a better position to grab him and the kid and to get out and to come back later after things calmed down. Whereas if it had escalated and no one was paying attention, then that kind of leaves you hoping that things work out. And I hope is not a strategy, as I have often said. So, all right, this is pretty rambly. It's been a while since I made a video. I've been sick, so my voice is all jacked up. We will see if this makes the light of day. For now, just understand that everyone applies cognitive shortcuts to things. The next one we're going to talk about is labels. Cognitive shortcuts in and of themselves are not good or bad. It's just something we do. If you have a little bit of understanding of them and you're aware when you do it and when other people are doing it, I think it's helpful. So that's all for today. Go read a book.